President Biden chose not to put 7 days of sick leave into the tentative agreement that he sent to Congress. The House of Representatives famously tried to add 7 days, kicked it over to the Senate, which stripped it out and passed it as Biden had initially sent it to Congress. Without those sick days, the unions have vowed to push ahead, demanding that they be included in an executive order that gives sick leave to all employees of companies that have federal contracts. Joining us now to follow up on this is Matthew Cunningham Cook, who with his colleagues over at Lever News has been following this extremely closely. So first of all, Matthew, welcome to Breaking Points.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
And so what are you hearing? Now, pretty soon after this defeat, and when Biden signed the law, he was asked, when are workers going to get 7 sick days? And he said, well, when I convince Republicans to go along. But as you've pointed out, there are other ways there. So what are those other ways? And why should people be confident? Not confident. But why should people believe it's possible that it could happen if Biden chose not to include it in the first place?
I think the main takeaway is that it's something that Biden can and should pick a fight on. So I think that there's certainly any executive order that extended paid sick leave to railroad workers would almost certainly be litigated in the courts. I think that's basically a guarantee. But in the past, very recently with the vaccine mandate, the railroad industry has said that they are federal contractors. So it seems like they could be included with this. Prior concerns about preemption with railroad laws seem to have focused on state-based legislation. So I think the executive order is one route. I think the other route, which potentially might be on more solid legal ground and addresses a broader gamut of issues that railroad workers are facing, is with this fatigue management rulemaking process that was mandated in this 2008 law reforming railroad safety, where the Secretary of Transportation and the Federal Railroad Administration were directed by Congress to begin comprehensive rulemaking to ensure that railroad workers aren't so fatigued. And the reason why this is so important is because when railroad workers are fatigued, it's much more likely that there's going to be a crash, that there's going to be ecological disasters, people killed. Railroads are not just transiting consumer goods. They transit dangerous chemicals, oil, coal, all things that really are not the safest things to be transporting. So that rulemaking began earlier this year, and now the railroad industry is required by next July to submit fatigue management plans, and they are supposed to be developing them in concert with the unions. And there's a lot of skepticism right now from the unions how seriously they're going to take it.
That's a huge question.
I think it's basically incumbent on Secretary Buttigieg to mandate that these plans include a rollback on these heinous attendance policies that were implemented outside of the collective bargaining process for the most part. BNSF, Warren Buffett's railroad, has the most aggressive of them. That was implemented in February, and that was where the paid sick leave demand came from. Is a response to these new really onerous attendance policies. So that I think that might be even on more solid legal ground, is basically Buttigieg saying, I'm not going to sign off on any plan submitted by the railroads unless we see a real rollback of these attendance policies and that we've really kind of consulted with the unions on how to reduce railroad worker fatigue, and that, it seems like you're taking those concerns seriously. So those are kind of the two, main routes, I think, to moving forward. I think there's a bunch of other kind of things too, as part of this that really are just kind of statements of principles or policy from the administration. The administration President Biden could say to the railroads, I just gave you guys a huge favor, and, I'm going to be watching you very closely, railroad company CEOs. And that hasn't really happened either. So I think there's what our reporting kind of showed is that there's a wide range of options that the administration can take to help railroad workers. And it's really about being creative at this point, just like the administration was frankly very creative when it came to the OSHA vaccine mandate,
Yes.
where they saw kind of an urgent public health issue and kind of said, we're going to say that this matters more than anything else, and we're going to implement this policy. And so I think the same kind of level of creativity that they engaged in with the OSHA vaccine mandate, they could choose to engage in with railroad workers as well.
That's a great parallel, and you can also see it in the student loan debt relief. There was some clear innovation in terms of procedural innovation in that vein. So I want to ask then also, Matthew, kind of the obvious question, which is it your sense, having looked at these mechanisms, Buttigieg is obviously aware that he's going to have to sign off on something. Is it your sense that the Biden administration is aware these routes and these mechanisms exist to tackle the issue? Do they know that they have this power? And then how confident are you, or not confident is perhaps the case, that they'll actually take any action here?
I'd be astounded if they didn't know. Again, it's the main thing is that if they didn't know that they can't take concrete, immediate actions to improve safety on the railroads right now, that would be astounding to me. And if they don't understand that, humans are a critical part of safety and workers are a critical part of safety, that would fly in the face of basically every piece of rhetoric of this administration. So I think that they are aware. I think that what they're kind of dealing with is, a very powerful railroad industry lobby that is opposed to anything that will improve safety on the railroads. So that's kind of my main takeaway. I think in terms of seeing action, the biggest issue, I think, is that railroad workers are 115,000 workers divided into 7 different international unions with not a lot of coherence or kind of a common strategy. And so that would be kind of my first kind of feeling, is that, and this is really kind of what Railroad Workers United, this worker organization that unites railroad workers across different unions and crafts, is really pushing for, is for some kind of more cohesion, I think, for railroad workers as to a common approach, not only with Washington, but I think in state capitals and with the media, with the corporate media as well. So that's, when you have such kind of levels of diffusion in the union workforce, it's hard to kind of see a coherent strategy for getting more out of the Biden administration.
Yeah, I just real quickly wanted to underscore the delicious nugget that you guys, unearthed in your reporting, or drawing the connection between the carriers telling the courts that they are in fact federal contractors, so that they could mandate their employees have to take the COVID vaccine. That seems like it's going to be pretty tough for them to walk back. They would obviously twist themselves in pretzels to do it, but if you're the Biden administration at this point, all you have to do is cite the carrier's own claim that they are federal contractors. Then they say, well, it would be so confusing to figure out which employees work on, which trains carrying, federal freight and which ones are carrying private freight. It's like, well, you didn't seem concerned about that when you were saying, well, only these employees are mandated to get the vaccine, but these employees don't. That seems like a pretty rich vein for the Biden administration there.
And that was my colleague Rebecca Burns who unearthed that, and I think it's a very, very good point. I think that what we see from the Roberts Court is that they will kind of change their reasoning on a dime to kind of justify whatever Ginny Thomas kind of wants at a given moment. But it's certainly worth trying. And I think the other thing is it's good to pick fights with the Roberts Court. This is a fundamentally undemocratic institution that frequently relies on precedent from slaveholding era or from the Gilded Age to justify its increasingly deranged decision-making processes. And I think, challenging that makes a lot of sense. Both
I think
politically.
Emily agreed with every word of that. Right?
Yes, I'm fully on board with that. That's a discussion for another time. But it is, if the Biden administration wasn't aware of what Rebecca unearthed there before, they sure as hell are now.
Yes. Yeah.
It seems like such a layup. It seems like obviously it's easy for us to say when they're hearing from the railroad industry and they like to keep the railroad industry super happy. But from a political perspective, let alone a moral perspective, it seems like such a layup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great reporting as always from the Lever. Matthew Cunningham Cook, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.